Hello and welcome to this episode of the Fortnightly Dispatch brought to you by the Baker Street Irregulars. I'm Steve Doyle and I'm your host. So over the time we've been doing this podcast, I've mentioned how the purpose of the show is to introduce Sherlockian viewers to interesting people that I think that they would benefit from knowing, and to also introduce a detailed conversation about different subjects and Sherlockian books and events and that sort of thing. But today, it's a little bit different. Today, our guest is someone that I personally have wanted to speak to ever since I was a teenager. Someone who I've known of, but never have had the opportunity to meet. Someone who I think shares a bit of shared interest of mine. And so that's what we're doing today. I also want to talk to him at some point about the importance and history of one of the more legendary and well-known science societies. I do think that promoting and discussing science societies and their value and history is an important thing for our shared Sherlockian history, and a concept that I think our fellow enthusiasts across the country and around the world, it's science society membership and activity is important, and it's where all the daily work of the Sherlockian universe happens. So anyway, without any further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Sean Wright to the show. Well, Sean, welcome to the show. I am really happy and excited to have you with us today. You are someone I look forward to meeting and getting to know better over the years. So I'm really happy to have you here with us today.
I'm very glad to be here with you, Steve.
So I always like to start out by asking our guests, where are you coming to us from? Where are you coming to us from today?
I'm in my home in Santa Clarita, California.
Great. That's Southern California, is that right?
It is 25 miles away from Hollywood.
Yeah, I knew you were there, out there somewhere near Hollywood. That's one of the things that brought you to my attention actually many years ago. But we'll get to that. So, Sean, tell us, one of the other things I like to know about people is when and how did you fall under the spell of Sherlock Holmes?
It's a rather long, well, I don't want to say a long story. It took a long time. When I was 3 years old, my family watched Basil Rathbone in a bootleg version on TV of The Hound of the Baskervilles.
Wait, the TV was showing a bootleg version?
Yeah. Back in the early days of television, there was no copyright for television. So anybody could walk in with a movie, a copy of a movie, and say, "Hello, would you like to rent this?" Oh. No problem. And they would do it. It wasn't until 1964, I believe, that the Supreme Court said, no, there is a copyright on television showings. So it went from TV stations accepting anything for some kind of a fee, and then after 64, it got to be where they would do nothing except the official rental places that rented these things out to television from the major production companies themselves. So in the early 50s, you could see just about anything that could be brought in. And since I was in Hollywood, we had 7 different stations, which at that time was more than anybody else. I think there might have been a few other cities that had more than 3, but we had 7. And as I say, when I was 3 years old, I saw Basil Rathbone in The Hound of the Baskervilles. And I remember remarking to myself that he looked like the devil.
Up until then, he'd been playing villains. So,
well, I wondered why it was. And later, when I saw it later on, after I grew up, when I was in my 20s, I realized that there's Rathbone in his deerstalker cap. and it's a very, it's black and white, and it's very shadowy, and the shadows of his ear flaps look dark underneath, and so that gave me the impression of horns.
That's very. I've never heard that, and that's unique. And you were 3 years old.
I was 3. Then again, the next time we saw it, I was 8 years old, and this time I noticed. In that version, he gets trapped in the where Stapleton has been keeping the Hound in some kind of underground cage,
tin mine or something.
Yeah, and he takes out his knife and he starts whittling away at the cover. And before that, because I was Catholic, I noticed that one of Henry Baskerville's men, when the Hound appears, makes the sign of the cross. And I said, ooh, Catholic. So now that was as far as it went. Aside from the fact that my father, in a very loving but satiric way, would always say to us children, your mother is a dependable Dr. Watson. Because she would.
That's high praise.
Well, he meant that she always reacted in the same way. He knew that she was always going to.
Was it eternal bafflement?
Well, no, it's just that whatever happened, he knew that she was going to act in the way she did. So he'd often just turn around and say, your mother is a dependable Dr. Watson. So, but then when I was 14, I saw the Cushing Hound.
Right.
And that was on the $1 Million Movie. And that was on every night of the week for 5 nights, and then twice on Saturday and twice on Sunday. And for some strange reason, I was able to see several times. And I was very impressed with what Cushing did. Well, then my sister came around, and she was a nun at the time. And she was teaching 8th grade, and she said, Sean, would you read some of these books I'm going to be using for my students? This was the summer. And among them was the scholastic version of The Hound of the Baskervilles. And so then I read it. So I actually find, I've read it. Now I know what's going on here. And that was where I really started being interested. And then I found a copy of The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes in paperback. I had a beautiful picture of Holmes standing like under a street lamp. And he's got his walking stick in front of him, and he's the deerstalker and capecoat and pipe. And I said, oh, this is great. And then I really started being, when I got to college, I asked the librarian at LACC where the Sherlock Holmes books were. And he gave me the Doubleday, the two.
Yeah, sure.
And then I saw next to it was The Exploits of Sherlock Holmes. I said, what's that? And he said, oh, that's just for enthusiasts. That was written by the author's son. That's just for enthusiasts. Oh,
well, I'll take that one too.
well, I didn't get that. I just got the 2 massive volumes, and so I started reading this, and that was it. That was it. And then I read in.
So what year was this?
That was 1967.
So all this was happening even before Annotated Sherlock Holmes came out, before 7% Solution and all that.
I read in Life magazine. I'm going to forget the man's name. He was an irregular, and he wrote a review of the Annotated. And I mentioned to my parents that this would be a really neat thing for me Christmas. And by golly, they got it for me. And I was absolutely enthralled. And now I knew the wonderful thing was that you actually could read. The way the Annotated is set up, of course, is that you can read the story and pay no attention to the notes. And it was just wonderful. But then I'm a footnote person, so I love footnotes. I love the footnotes too. But So I got the annotated and then mentioned the Baker Street Irregulars, the whole chapter devoted to the Irregulars. My sister, by this time, was librarian. And I said, gee, I wonder where these Baker Street Irregular people are. And she checked the Gale, reference book. And they had Baker Street Irregulars and they had Julian's address. And I wrote him a letter. And I got a letter back from him, a form letter. You remember Julian's, how he always had those little he'd always communicate on little half-size sheets.
Mm-hmm.
And this was his form letter saying, thank you very much for inquiring. And if you send something to Bill Raby, he was with the old soldiers of Baker Street, the old SOBs.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And Bill Raby, Julian in his form letter says, send, 2 had been crossed out and he'd written in 3. Send $3 to Bill Raby at this place. And I sent 4 letters and 2 checks and never heard from him. It's now 1970. And sometime in the middle of the year, I wrote to Julian and said, I've never heard from this person. What do I do now? And he wrote back this time, well, why don't you get in touch with Luther Norris? He lives in Culver, so I give you the address.
Mm-hmm.
I called Luther and I said, I talked to Julian Wolfe and I said, I told him that about the Sherlock Holmes, where the society is here. And he said that there was none but to talk to you. And Luther said, well, I'm busy doing the Parade Street Irregulars.
Right. He was the head of the Solar Ponds Society.
The Lord Warden of the Pontine Marshes, yeah.
Right.
And he sent me. When I told Luther that I wanted to be in the society, he said, "Well, there is none. There hasn't been for several years." He said, "But I've got a list of 25 people, and I'll send it to you if you want to get in touch with them." And I did. And we decided to have a meeting at the home of Sir Alvin Germishausen in the Hollywood Hills.
So this is where you're starting your own Sherlock Holmes Society there.
Right. And because of Luther, so I have these names. And we chose a night, September the 10th of 1970. And I was in a play and they had a dress rehearsal. And I was late. I told them I'd be late because of this. This wasn't supposed to be happening, but there you were. So I got I brought the annotated with me, and I had a painting that I'd drawn of Sherlock Holmes with my arm. And I came over, and I'm 20 years old. And Sir Alvin opened his door, and when I left, I didn't even take off the makeup. So I've got this yellow grease paint on my face. And I'm sorry, I didn't tell you. I was in a play called Rashomon.
Oh my goodness!
And I'm playing. I had a small part. I was the bailiff. And so after doing,
so you're still wearing stage makeup, and you show up at this.
I wanted to just get out of there real fast, and I was late. And I wanted to try and get there before the thing ended. So I've got this.
So you attended your first meeting in disguise.
A rascally lascar.
Yeah.
Anyway, there were still a few people left, and everybody put their name down. I had put their name on paper, and we came up, and we had made some suggestions about, a fine collection of M's or other things. And I said, how about the Noncanonical Calabashes? And they liked that. So we started doing the Noncanonical Calabashes. And
that's a kind of a legendary California science society.
Yes.
Name. I mean, it's well known in the history of Sherlockian science societies. When I was growing up when I became a Sherlockian in the mid 70s, I remember there were these magazines, that were coming out, collectors magazines, devoted to Sherlock Holmes, and there were references to the Baker Street Irregulars and surely lots of movie stuff in there. But there are also these sort of cryptic photographs of meetings from the non-canonical Calabashes in California. And I thought it just seemed so far off and so, unattainably mysterious and romantic that these groups as far away as California were gathering, and so yeah, so I've known of the non-canonical Calabashes since I was about 14 or 15 years old. So that's an interesting origin story to hear that.
Well, I expected that would be, that they said, well, you write a constitution. So I did that. And I expected that everybody else, the older people, would do something, we would be and I'd sit there and learn. And they elected me the head of the society. And I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. And that was one of the reasons why I said, let's call it the non-canonical Calabashes, because I haven't the foggiest notion what we're doing.
You're all 20 years old, right? I mean, that's it.
Yeah. And I expected, I would sit at these people's feet and take notes and learn about what was going on. And no, I was shoved right into the midst of everything. And I've learned, of course, now that I'm 71, what you do is you always get the younger people because they've got more energy. So let them do things.
That's good advice. That's good advice. And they're usually, we get old and jaded, but they're usually on fire with new excitement. Yeah, it's a good thing.
Now, at that first meeting was a man named Art Ronnie. And Art Ronnie I had known growing up, not personally, but his writing for the Herald Examiner. My parents always got the Herald instead of the Times or anything like that. And they had an inserted TV log, which was a little booklet. And Art Ronnie wrote the funniest capsule comments for movies. For instance, like, Dracula meets Jesse James, and he'd write, title tells all. Or the woman they almost lynched. Caption, it's a shame they didn't. So on and so forth. Well, he was there at that first meeting. By that time, he was working at 20th Century Fox in their publicity department. So he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. He said, I'll put a little squib into the Times and the Herald and Variety and the Reporter about the society. So this little one-inch filler piece appeared, and I thought, because none of my friends had any interest in Sherlock Holmes, they just thought it was another one of Sean's enthusiasms. And I thought maybe we'd have 25 members, maybe. 50 was beyond thinking. Well, because of Art, within that first month, we had 100 people inquire about the society.
Fantastic.
And within the first year, we had like 800 or 900. And within the first 3 years, we had about 5,000 people who had wanted to know about the society, and some joined and some didn't. And Los Angeles is a very transitory town, I discovered. There were people who would join for a couple of years and then move out of town. So we were always having a new turnover in members.
So what was your average number at any given time?
Oh, we'd send things out to about 800 people. About 150.
So think of that, everybody. 800 sort of official members who are, in one way or another, members of this organization.
Well, we had 150 or so paying dues.
Nonetheless, even that's pretty good, but that's remarkable.
Yeah.
That's pretty, no wonder I knew about them all the way back in South Bend, Indiana.
Yeah.
I knew about the Calabashes. That's amazing.
Well, I remember talking to Dean Dickensheet in San Francisco in the Scourers, and I talked to him over the phone, and I told him his name had been given to me by Luther, and I called him and told him what I was doing, and he said, "What are you calling the society?" And I said, "The Non-Canonical Calabashes," and he laughed uproariously and said, "That's a name that's not going to be taken. That's not going to be copied." I said, "Okay, fine."
Well, he was right.
Yeah. No, actually, there was I noticed in the science pages of the journal that there was at one point the apocryphal Calabashes, and then there was the uncanonical Calabashes.
Maybe it was an homage.
The thing, of course, is that I love a calabash pipe. A calabash is just a wonderful pipe to have. and it's one of my favorites.
Now, does that have a meerschaum bowl in it?
Yeah, this is an interesting kind because it doesn't have the mushroom shape.
Yeah, the big.
It's it's flush. And sometimes you see, like, I think Christopher Plummer smokes one something similar to this. This is a small one, but what do I have here? The clay is one of my favorites, and the cherry wood. The thing about pipes. Now, this is something else. When my brother was in the Army, he enlisted just before Vietnam. So he was sent to Germany and sat out the Vietnam War in Germany. And he told me, he said, by the way, he said, if you ever want to smoke pipes, let me know. They have a wonderful selection of pipes here, and they're very reasonable, a lot cheaper than in the States. At the time, a normal calabash type pipe would cost between $30 and $40. This is $1966.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, 1966, yes. And he said, so if you want to, he said, I can get these pipes, meerschaum pipes are like $7 or $8. And I said, oh, okay. And I said, why? Oh, another thing. In 1958, Life magazine had done a spread on the touring Sherlock Holmes room that had come over to America from the Festival of Britain in 1951.
Right. Yes.
And I was impressed by this picture of a calabash pipe, which they said nothing about. But I said, my God, look at that pipe. So when my brother sent this letter, I said, is there something? I made a drawing of what I thought it looked like. And I said, do you know anything that's like, it's a Sherlock Holmes pipe. Do you know anything about this? And he wrote back and said, yes, it's called a calabash and this and that. And by golly, for Christmas that year, I got a calabash pipe. And that was what I used to draw the logo for the society. And that was that's my favorite pipe. That's just that was my first big pipe. There were a couple of pipes. Steve, you probably remember you used to be able to go to a drugstore, and they'd have racks of pipes.
Oh, sure, Dr. Graybo or those corncob pipes, kind of in those little.
Dr. Graybo and
plays, yeah.
And so of course a boy's first pipe is a Dr. Graybo or something like that, and you think that you're really I'm 18.
Oh, yeah, you're happening then, yeah. Exactly.
Well, I was 16, and I was so impressed that I've got a Sherlock Holmes pipe. So that was the non-canonical calabash.
Hey, Sean, we have to take a break. It's time to get in a word from our sponsor. Okay, we're back. Well, I want to ask you about so you're in Hollywood. You kind of originally came to Holmes through the movies, and I know that you have an interest in Sherlockian film. I have here something of interest. It's out of my own personal collection.
Oh,
it is the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences Evening with Sherlock Holmes program from January 30th, 1981.
I don't even have one of those. I'll be happy to have a copy.
I'll send you a copy. Can't have this one because it's signed by Gail Sondergaard.
Oh, yes.
Now, I would like to talk to you about this because I was
the master of ceremonies that night.
That's right. It says right here, an Evening with Sherlock Holmes program. I'll just give you a little read here. Introductory remarks by Sean Wright and Gail Sondergaard. And then there's a tremendous list of Sherlock Holmes films shown here at this event, all coordinated with the help and cooperation of the Film Technology Company, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, UCLA Film Archives, Universal Pictures, and on and on. And it's quite an impressive lineup of film. I have as you know, may or may not know, I've done you know, a series of film conferences over the years myself here. And so undoubtedly the seed for those were planted long ago when I learned about this. I learned about this sometime in the 80s, well after it was over. And so talk about your interest in Sherlockian film and this conference, because I find this, you know, to be remarkable.
Well, I'll tell you about the conference. I was contacted by a film historian named Anthony Slide, and he told me about this. We were, that year, the Calabashes were celebrating, of course, the 100th anniversary of the first of Study in Scarlet. And so this was a big thing for us. And back in January, we'd hosted a very large meeting. There were about 200 people who came to that. We had celebrities. We had, I'm going to forget all their names now. It's so long ago. I didn't prep on this. But all these different celebrities came to the Sherlock Holmes meeting. Christopher Lee couldn't come, but he sent me a letter signed by Mycroft Holmes, and he'd written Diogenes Club at the top. He had been to one of our meetings before. He couldn't make this one. Edith Meiser sent some background about her radio work, and I published all these things in the Sherlockian Meddler for January, or for December, excuse me, and for the January meeting. And as I said, we had a number of celebrities, people who had played Sherlock Holmes. We had a lot of film clips. And then following that meeting, the Academy put on this show, and they showed beautiful prints of clips from a lot of different films. And among them was the John Barrymore film. And the Barrymore
had not been restored yet or anything.
Well, they didn't. Yeah. Well, no. Here's the thing. Anthony Slide told me that they were going to show this, that they would have this. To be shown from a private collector. And I said, but the only known copy of this exists in the Eastman House in pieces. And he said, yes, we know. And he said, he doesn't want to be introduced. He doesn't want anybody to know who he is. He's terribly protective of this, and he doesn't want anybody to know. We're getting it on loan. And it's just going to be, we're just going to show a clip from it. And I said, okay, fine. Well, they showed rather a long clip, and it was in pristine, absolutely pristine condition. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, this is John Farrell and I, we've saying, you know, we've got to, John was always saying that these things are always going to show up. I said, what do you mean? He said, these films are always going to show up. They're in some vault somewhere. They might be in Europe, or they might be in Asia. He said these lost films are going to show up. And so when the Barrymore film eventually was shown, but it wasn't the same copy. The one that Turner Classic Movies showed and sells. It's not the same copy. This one, it looked like it had just come off just come off the camera. It was a gorgeous, pristine. And later that year, we were at something for John Bennett Shaw. He was doing one of the shows up in Palo Alto, and they showed the Eastman Kodak version. And I was telling him, I said, no, this is not the way it's supposed to go. This scene, no, the scenes are all mixed up. No. He said, well, this is the only copy we've got. I said, I can't help you.
You're right. That's so interesting, though. And John Farrell was right. We'll talk about John here in a minute.
Good, I hope.
John Farrell was right, though. These films are out there. We've seen the Barrymore film come back, and maybe it's the order. But it is now a thing. Yeah. And then we've got, of course, the famous William Gillette film, the film we thought we'd never see in our lifetime ever. Right. It's back. It's out. It's it's been restored. Even some of those Norwood films, I've seen a couple of them at the BSI event in Chautauqua, New York, and it was, as you said, pristine. I mean, It's a revelation to see them when they're so clean, and like the shot yesterday, right? And it's just, so he was right. They are out there, and whatever else is missing is probably out there somewhere too. So
John missed, unhappily. John died the year before the Gillette showcase, the Gillette movie was found, he would have been happy.
Well, let's talk about John for a minute.
Please.
Many irregulars know John. Remember John fondly. I had the pleasure of getting to know him, along the way. And but who was he? And I know that you wrote a book with him. We'll talk about that. But who was John Farrell? I know he was your friend.
42 years, yes.
Mm-hmm.
He said the only reason why I didn't come to the first meeting was because of some mix-up. He said, or else I'd be among the founders too. I said, yes, of course. But John came to our first restaurant dinner meeting in January of 71. John, when I met him, impressed me as somebody certainly who knew the canon back and forth. He was always very proud of the fact that Luther Norris continually forgot that he was already a member of the Street Irregulars, and he has 3 different investitures in the Irregulars, in the Street Irregulars. And John was one of those omnivorous readers who knew something about just about everything. You would always learn something with John, aside from being terribly affable and
very funny man.
Very, very funny man.
So you knew John for like 42 years, and you wrote a book with him. That's back there on my shelf somewhere. Tell us about that book.
The Sherlock Holmes Cookbook. It started with Luther Norris. Luther, as you know, used to write little chapbooks, as he called them, and different things that would come under his purview, and somebody would write and he'd publish it. And he mentioned to me one day, Sean, he said, do you know anything about cooking? And I said, well, kinda, maybe, possibly. He said, why don't you write, let me like 60 different recipes, and we'll put it into a little chapbook and call it the Sherlock Holmes the Sherlock Holmes Cookbook. And I said, well, that's nice. And at the time, I had absolutely no faith in my culinary efforts at all. I was 22, I think. And I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, aside from making like scrambled eggs or something. Farrell, on the other hand, had a library of European cookbooks and different things. He loved the idea of cooking. Well, 1974 came around, and Nick Meyer's book, 7% Solution. And all of a sudden, everybody was doing Sherlock Holmes. And I pointed out, it came under my attention that there was a Sherlock Holmes calendar being published by Drake Publishing Company. And I had been putting out a private Sherlock Holmes calendar for Irregulars since 72, I think. Yeah, 72. So I called up Drake Publishers in New York, and I said, I put out the Sherlock Holmes calendar. Is this a breach of copyright? And the editor there said, do you own the rights to Sherlock Holmes? I said, no. He said, do you own the rights to the calendar? I said, no. He said, therefore, we're not in any copyright problem, are we? I said, oh, I guess not. He said, but have you done, he said, would you like to do anything? Do you have any other ideas for a Sherlock Holmes project? Well, I said, my friend John Farrell and I have been kicking around the idea of doing a Sherlock Holmes cookbook. Oh, great idea. Wonderful idea. Oh, wonderful. Terrific. Wonderful. So they sent us a contract. I want to tell you, by the way, that we made every single mistake that a young writer can make in the Sherlock Holmes cookbook. They sent us a contract. So we signed the contract and started waiting for the advance. And after a couple of months, we wondered where the advance was. I called up and I said, what advance? There was nothing about an advance in the contract. Oh. So we should have put the advance in the contract. Yes, but we didn't. So, okay. So we don't get an advance. All right. Well, we started John started doing the book. I didn't do anything for a while. And one day, he and his brother came over to my home, and they said, "How you doing? Put something in a suitcase. We're kidnapping you." So they kidnapped me to their parents' house. So for 2 weeks, John and I worked on the Sherlock Holmes cookbook. He had already done most of his work. Then I started doing my work. And I had my cookbook, and I called my mother, and she gave me recipes. And my half is the Baker Street meals and menus, which are supposed to be more along Luther's idea of a kind of a whimsical idea of, eating, we should have foods in honor of Sherlock Holmes cases. Something that happened, we didn't put a dedication in it. We wanted to dedicate it to Luther. And by the time we thought about it and said, "We want to add this, by the way," and they said, "No, you can't do that." And I said, "What do you mean you can't do that?" The publisher said, "You can't do that." I said, "Why can't we put a dedication?" Well, it's almost all, you should have sent that in with everything else. I said, "Well, why can't we send it in now? It's only been a couple of weeks." "Well, it's already done. We can't do it. Too bad." And Luther's nose was a little out of joint because of that. And we sent him a copy, both John and I, and we signed, and we were very, very sad. We were very sorry that his name wasn't there. And I found out, about 20 years ago, after he died, and that copy was being sold on Amazon. It said that it had a dedication from John Farrell, or from the authors, to Luther Norris. And it was going for $105. And I wondered what the heck the $5 was for.
Yeah, I wonder. That's interesting. Well,
that's the story of the cookbook. So we committed every sin that a young writers will do. We didn't ask for an advance. We didn't know what the contract was. We didn't really read the contract. We just said, "Let's go do it. Let's get started."
No dedication. You just
no dedication. Yeah,
well,
everything was just wrong.
What strikes me as a publisher is, and a person who has written books as well, it is it's in that, it strikes me that in that fevered hothouse of the mid 1970s, when the 7% Solution was out, that it was that easy to get the book, to get it though. You just called up, and publishers were so keen on doing something to tap into the zeitgeist that was going on, that, "Hey, I got these two guys on the phone who are, you got any ideas for a book? Oh, we're going to do," boom. Okay. It was that easy. Most people do not have it that easy, but it was the right idea, certainly at the right time. Those of us who were there remember what that was like. That was quite the time.
Well, what was also interesting is that Julian Rosenblatt and I can't think of her husband's name. What's it?
Al.
Yes, the Honorable Al. Al and Julia had put out their Sherlock Holmes cookbook at the same time. Ours had like a couple of months advance notice on it. So they decided to call their book "Dining with Sherlock Holmes." And I wrote them. I said, "I didn't know that you were planning to do anything with somebody from an actual chef. Had no idea. This was just an off-the-cuff thing." And Al wrote back and said, "Well, I think there's room for 2 Sherlock Holmes cookbooks on the market." I said, "Yeah,
sure." You mean you're actually using a real chef for your book? How dare you? That's funny. That's really funny. So you got a book published, kind of a landmark in its own way. You got a little money, and you got copies, but you've got the historical legacy of having written this.
The first Sherlock Holmes cookbook. Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, sir. This has been great. I'm very grateful. And like I said, one of the great blessings for me personally is in this podcast is that I get to talk to people who are either friends or who I've wanted to talk to for a long time. And you were certainly in the second category. So this has been a real treat for me.
I hope that I will be in the first category.
Well, I'm moving you over right now. Done.
Steve, it's a
Thank you very
I want to say, by the way, that your editorship of the journal is just very, very commendable.
Well. I don't edit it. I publish it.
I'm sorry, you publish it.
I publish it. Steve Rothman is the editor.
Ah,
So he does a great job. He does a
ah,
great job. So, well, thank you so much, sir. I want to. We've got to. Our time is up, and we must go. So until next time, take care.
thank you very much, Steve.
And that's it for this episode of the Fortnightly Dispatch, brought to you by the Baker Street Irregulars. I want to thank everybody for your continued support and continued viewership. It really means so much. It lets us know that we're doing something here that people find valuable, and that really does mean a lot. If you have any comments or questions, be sure to just post them on whatever Facebook page you might find this, or on our YouTube channel. I would urge you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and send us any suggestions or questions you might have, and we'll answer them in the next show. So without any further ado, that's it for this episode. And until next time, we'll see you then.